Aikwe, Nakanama Lita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. Today I will be talking about my December 2021 wrap-up. Happy New Year! I hope everyone's doing great. I read 7 books, which isn't bad, but it wasn't quite as much as I had wanted to read. In the month of December, I was really kind of hoping to push for, my soft goal was to reach 100 books, and I reached 94, and I was even hoping that I would push to 95, but I'm fine with 94. That's a good number. It's still way above my original goal of 45. I'm happy. So let's find out my stats for the month. So like I said, I read 7 books for the month of December, which equates to 2,341 pages, and my average rating is 3.93. Let's break that down. It looks like I had 0 1 stars, 0 2 stars, 0 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 4 stars, and 1 4.5 star. So not bad in terms of quality, in my opinion. For genres, I read 1 nonfiction, 2 horror, 3 sci-fi, and 1 fantasy. And in terms of audience, they were all adult. And then in terms of formats, all but one of these were audiobooks. The rest, the one was a physical book. So let's get into the books. So the first book that I read for the month of December was The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. This book follows a young girl named Melanie who every morning waits in her cell to be collected for class, strap her into a wheelchair, while Sergeant Parks keeps his gun pointed at her. She thinks they don't like her. She jokes they don't bite, they don't laugh. So we're following Melanie. This is like apocalyptic horror. There was a virus that went around and they're finding out certain things about it, particularly with Melanie and these other children. It kind of just evolves from there. I enjoyed this. What I give this? I gave this a 4 star. It did creep me out, mostly because the virus kind of basically M.R. Carey took the idea of the fungus that grows. I saw this in I know what documentary they were talking about. It's a David Attenborough. I don't know if it was Earth or what, but it was basically a documentary that David Attenborough ends up narrating. And I think it's in South America, where there's this fungus that when it spores, it tries to find a host. And basically the host is an ant, and the ant is then, it kind of gets into the ant's brain, and the ant ends up kind of going a little wonky and ends up trying to get to the highest place that it can find, usually in a tree or something, so that when the mushroom sprouts out of its exoskeleton and kills the ant. So then when it does spore again, it can spore on the wind and get spread further. So I remember seeing that and thinking, does that happen to humans? That'd be scary if it happened to humans. And basically M.R. Carey took that and put it in a book. And this one, I had a vlog that I was doing that this was mentioned briefly in it. I had read this at the beginning of the vlog, that will have linked above as well as down below. And basically I said it was like Matilda meets I Am Legend meets that, with that aspect of the sickness, the reason of zombification. It really, and I still, it's still what it reminds me of is just Matilda meets I Am Legend. It wasn't bad at all. There was certain aspects of it that I wish were a bit more in depth, really. For instance, the ending for some reason was disappointing to me. I'm not sure why. But it made sense. It was a creepy book. Really enjoyed it. Really scratched that spook itch, that horror itch that I had been feeling since September. Next I read a series. It's like my first and only series that I read for 2021 and finished and completion, and that is The Themis Files by Sylvain Neuvel. Have Sleeping Giants, Waking Gods, and Only Human. I ended up doing a in the same vlog that briefly mentioned The Girl with All the Gifts. I ended up just unexpectedly reading this whole series. So the vlog is really just about, it's an unexpected Themis Files reading vlog, which I'll, again, like, it's linked if you want to watch it. But yeah, I did not expect to this whole series in one go. I had remember trying to read Sleeping Giants a bit ago and just wasn't getting into it, and I guess that's what I needed this time around, because I flew through it. And it's been so long since like a book or series in general like had me so excited that I'm like, I need the next book, I need the next book now. So I was just riding that motivation and read through all of these and just binged it. It was great. Each individual one is rated differently. I have Sleeping Giants as a 4.5, Waking Gods as a 4, and Only Human as a 3. And basically we are following documents or recordings of what ends up happening on Earth. In the first book, we have an anonymous interviewer who's going around, and he's kind of focusing on Rose Franklin, who is the lead physicist to a project that he's having her lead to figure out. When she was little, she ended up falling into a hole and landing on a gigantic hand, and so years later she's now a physicist, and this anonymous person ended up basically giving her the funds and the opportunity to create a team and trying to figure out, is there more body parts and do they fit together, what do they make, how does it work, where did it come from. And so we're following that, but we are also following, and basically it's humanity's response to this gigantic machine, what that means for humanity, and humanity's reaction to it being a machine, a possible weapon, out of the proof of life outside of Earth, etc. So was a really interesting series. It's one that I am have been thinking about all month, despite like I loved Sleeping Giants. My one issue with the whole series is that I didn't feel as connected to the characters. Basically, I wish I was connected more to the characters, but I don't know how that would have worked necessarily with how it was written. With some of the characters, I was more connected to than with others. Like, I just didn't care. There are some things that ended up some events that ended up happening within these books that I feel like should have had an emotional response because of what happens to these characters, but it just didn't happen because I wasn't as connected as I wanted to be. But ultimately still really enjoyed the series. Like I said, I love the first one. That tends to be one that the first in a series tends to be ones that I most enjoy out of the rest of the series so far that I've noticed when reading series. But the one I'm most interested in because it's the one that's like giving us the explanation of the world, giving us the explanation of technology, or has the world building, has all the information dump on like the magic system or whatever it happens to be for that particular series. For this one, it was like the initial finding and building and figuring everything out, and I just love that about the first book in a series. It's the introduction. It's like this eye-opening brand new world that we get to explore. So that tends to be why the first one tends to be better for me than most. It's also, I think, tends to be the writing. I don't think this one really suffered from Waking Gods. I don't think it suffered from middle book syndrome. The end of Sleeping Giants made me want to read Waking Gods like immediately because of the ending, and like immediately picked it up. And of course, like Sylvain Neuvel wrote it in a way that I'm just like, well, what's gonna happen next? So it just had to happen. So I was able to read listened to Sleeping Giants through my library, but they didn't have the rest of the series, which was frustrating. So I ended up having to get Waking Gods and Only Human through Libro, which was fine. And I enjoyed the series so much that I wanted physical copies, which I'm glad of because they are gorgeous. First off, those colors are vibrant and nice. The fronts are very interesting and entertaining, and then the naked covers themselves are really dynamic. So yeah, it was just a fun series, and I really enjoyed as a series as a whole. It like averages out to a 4 stars. Next, I ended up reading a nonfiction, and that was Feminism: Notes from Women That the Movement Forgot by Mikki Kendall. This one goes over, Mikki Kendall basically goes over feminism and its blind spots. Feminism as a whole, since like it started with the suffragettes, has always been very white centric. It's always been racist and leaving out Black women, women of color, Indigenous women, as well as those in the LGBTQ community. It's always been focused on white women. And over the years to current day, it's still glaringly obvious that it's white women first, and everyone else just kind of has to work harder. So Mikki Kendall kind of is going over some of the issues that feminists need to look at. And it's not just like feminism as a whole is very racist, mean, if that makes sense. Basic, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Mikki Kendall explains it better. So I really highly suggest you read this book. It is basically Mikki Kendall going over some spots that is pretty obvious that mainstream feminism is ignoring. Issues of Black women, issues of Indigenous women, issues of women of color, LGBTQ communities, disabled communities, all that, but as well as listing off some things that need to be feminist issues because they are indeed feminist issues. Scarcity, housing, I believe there was a couple others and I can't quite remember. It was a good one to listen to. I'm really glad I did listen to this, and then I liked it enough that I wanted a physical copy. I do hope to reread this at some point and mark it up. When that will happen, I'm not sure, but it does have some valid, like, good and valid points in here. I think the only reason I ended up giving a 4-star instead of a 5 is just because some of the things that it felt like I already knew, but that feels like, and it was kind of repetitive, but it made sense to me of why it was, particularly for someone who wants to explore more and doesn't know just how glaringly obvious how the mainstream feminism is lacking. That's just how I felt. I do think it should be required reading. There was a couple of books this year that I felt were that way, and this definitely goes into that category. Ultimately, I really enjoyed it, and I liked the points that Mikki Kendall had to make. Next, I read Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a novella horror. Very short story. It's like 136 pages. I ended up listening to this through my library. And it is explained on Goodreads as a contemporary horror story where a teen prank goes very wrong and all hell breaks loose. Is there a supernatural cause, a psychopath on the loose, or both? Basically, we are following one particular teenager who... We are following a particular teenager who he and his group of friends end up pulling a prank on one of their other friends at a movie theater that involves a mannequin. It doesn't go as planned, and the mannequin ends up getting up and walking out. He believes that the mannequin somehow is alive. I don't know how to explain this without giving it all away. Basically, this one particular teenager believes that the mannequin is out to get them. I don't know how I feel about this. I think I ended up giving it a 3-star. Just because it was creepy. I originally gave it a 3.5 star. I think I'm going to bump that down to a 3-star. I'm still trying to figure out what I do and don't like about Stephen Graham Jones' writing. I do want to like them, but I feel like it's like one of those things where because I'm not a slasher fan or like into slasher movies, there's something I'm missing from his writing, because that tends to be his go-to, particularly when it came to like My Heart is a Chainsaw, and Night of the Mannequins kind of has that similar aspect of that. We're not quite sure if it's in the main character's head or not, is what I'll say about that. But it was creepy in certain aspects, so I gave it that. And that's the portions that I did like. What I didn't quite like, it's this, is it real or isn't it, that I don't quite like about it. Yeah, and that's one of the issues that I had with Heart is a Chainsaw. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out Stephen Graham Jones. And then my final book for 2021 was The Forever Sea by Joshua. What was that? Joshua Philip Johnson. This one we are following Kindred Greyreach, who is a hearth fire keeper on the Errant, and she's just getting to feel like she's really part of her crew. Basically, the ships are sailing on a vast expanse of prairie where the grasses are so deep that they don't know how deep they go. There are like creatures living within the grass that can pull the ships down. Basically, if the hearth fire keeper is essential to be able to keep the ship afloat. And basically we were following Kindred as she's basically finding herself and feeling like she's finally fitting in within her crew, only to then be told her old crew that her grandmother, the captain of her old crew, has walked off into the prairie and is never to be seen again. So this really disturbs Kindred because basically her grandmother is all she had left, and her last words to her were like a fight. So Kindred then feels like she's lost herself again, and she's like, throughout this whole book, she's really just trying to figure out who she is, as well as like finding the answers from like about her grandmother and like what it means. This one took me a while to read, and for a while I wasn't blaming the book because I did genuinely just have a hard time finding time to physically read this. I got this when I was down in Southern California. It's a gorgeous cover and I really like the premise, and I started it like when I was down in Southern California back in November, and it took me all of December to read it. I keep doing this, it's just like, it's not the book, but it kind of was. So the book it was interesting, and then like about midway through it was like it plateaued, and I'm like, it was just a lot of inner narration from Kindred. We're also getting we're being told this story about Kindred from someone else as well, so it was trying to also figure out this like bigger story at hand, but we're not getting a bunch of that. So it's like it always made me, this is going to be a series. I don't know how big, but the second book has it's called The Forever Song. I think it's called The Forever Song. The Endless Song? I can't remember. Was announced on the author's website not long ago, and it should be out in late 2022, maybe. Ultimately, I would like to go forward with this series because I do think it's very interesting, and I like the world. The world building was gorgeous. I absolutely loved it. However, I think it was just almost too much fantasy because I'm also currently reading Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. So with J.R.R. Tolkien's explanations and world building and history, this was almost a bit much to also read about in terms of history as well as world building. Not that it wasn't interesting, but it was also just a lot of inner dialogue with Kindred, and it was just like after a while I began to resent her because I was just like, okay, what are you doing? You're putting your crewmates in danger. You're being very selfish. And it felt like everything that happened was Kindred's fault. And the first couple times I'm like, I mean, whatever. But then after a couple more times I'm like, okay, like what the fuck? Why you keep fucking up? And then by the end of it, by like it must have been like the last bit. But when I saw the ending coming, when I saw the ending in sight, I started getting more invested and interested into the story. I don't know. And it was to the point where I was just kind of like, okay, I would like to be done with this book. Like it became kind of a chore. And not that I wasn't like disliking picking it up. It was just like, I was getting to the point where I was like looking at other books going, I'd really like to pick those up, knowing I wasn't done with this, and like debating if I could really put it on a soft DNF until I was ready to pick it back up again. But worried that if I did that, especially like at that point, I was like 3/4 of the way through, that I wouldn't pick it up. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I think I'm gonna put that down to a 3.5. No, 4 stars is about right because I am thinking about it a lot. It was just like in the moment, like maybe it was just the timing of reading it. Probably shouldn't have been reading it as I'm listening to J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't know, maybe it was just a fantasy overload. Ultimately, I did love the world building. I did love the characters. I wish we got a little more character. Not so much like we got a really good character development from Kindred, but I almost wish we had a little more from other people. And there was elements of this that really reminded me of like Treasure Planet. I haven't read the book, but like the Disney movie, there was elements of that. Like basically her Kindred's captain the whole time reminded me of the captain in Treasure Planet, and I'm just like, her voice was in my head the whole time I was reading for the captain in here. It was a fun book. Ultimately, it just took a little bit, so I'm cautiously eager for the next book in this series. All right, and that is my December wrap up for 2021. That is my, wow. Yeah, if you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear them. Please, no spoilers. Otherwise, how would you sum up your 2021? I feel like it was very much like my reading in terms it was very meh. It was very middle of the road. There were some good things that happened. There were some bad things that happened. But ultimately, I feel like I can't complain too much. And I'm just interested to see how 2022 goes. I hope that everyone is doing well. I hope that you're in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading. And I hope to see you again in another video very soon. Yeah. Happy New Year. Cheerio.